Gnome Blessings, fellow Gnomeans. What if we lived as if the world is crowded with neighbors that we don't usually notice? Not just birds and foxes, but the kind of neighbors that folklore whispers about. The ones that lean on the breeze, humming the old stones, and flicker in the flame when you stare just a little bit too long. You don't have to believe anything today. You only have to join me in a good natured maybe. This episode is our backpacking trip through that maybe. We'll visit the ancient thinkers who gave us the four elements, the Renaissance physician who sorted out nature spirits like a botanist with butterflies, the folklore that tangled elementals with elves and house brownies, and the modern experiments, spiritual and scientific, that keep this conversation interesting. Along the way, we'll collect surprising facts you can actually tell your skeptical uncle at the dinner table. You still probably will get some eye rolls, but at least you can try. So, let's get into it. Before anyone said elemental, there were just the big four: earth, fire, water, air. In ancient Greece, the philosopher Empedocles called them the roots of all things. That model shaped Western thought for centuries. Meanwhile, in China, scholars leaned on a different system, not four elements, but five dynamic phases: wood, fire, earth, metal, and water. Those weren't static building blocks so much as interacting forces, a moving cycle. Two ways of reading reality, one like a recipe, the other more like a dance. Either way, people looked at nature and saw a pattern, agency, intention. The world wasn't dead, it was busy. Fast forward to the 1500s, and we meet a fiery Swiss physician and alchemist with an even fierier name, Philippus Areolus Theophrastus Bombastus von Hohenheim. But he went by Paracelsus. He stitched together medical practice, occult philosophy, and a blunt pen. And in one influential treatise, he sorted nature's spirits into four families that matched the elements: gnomes for earth, undines for water, sylphs for air, and salamanders for fire. Paracelsus didn't claim these were angels or demons. In his worldview, they were a parallel order of beings, bound to their element the way fish are bound to water. Gnomes slip through stone as easily as we stroll through air. Sylphs carry currents and pollen and lightness itself. Undines embody the intelligence of streams and tides. Salamanders, not the newts, but fire's lean, bright custodians. And here's a weird detail many folks miss. Paracelsus also said that these beings lacked an immortal soul, but could gain one through a true union with a human. That line definitely sounds very 16th century theology, but I kind of think that those sort of things that he wrote might have just been to keep him off the heretic list, so he could talk about nature spirits without being hauled off for devilry. Paracelsus treated these beings like co-workers of nature. Rivers run because undines tend them. Roots take hold because gnomes sort out the mineral business underfoot. Fire transforms because salamanders know their craft. He wasn't writing a children's book. He was proposing a metaphysics that said, if you really want to understand nature, you can't ignore its invisible labor force. Whether you take that literally or symbolically, it's a useful thought experiment. If the wind were a colleague instead of a resource, how would we be treating our air? So if you grew up on fairy tales, you already know cousins to Paracelsus's elementals. There's the dryads of the trees, the naiads of the springs, house elves who sweep and sulk, the will-o'-wisps that lure the unwary off the path. But folklore fairies are not always the tidy, hard-working department heads of the elementals. They're people, complicated, capricious, sometimes cranky. Across Europe, fairy lore is basically a long record of neighbor relations. Borrow a skillet, return it cleaner than before, protect your cow and the milk keeps flowing, offend the fair folk and your bread won't rise, your baby won't sleep in the path you know like your own hand, suddenly doesn't lead you home anymore. Folklore isn't an HR manual, it's a mess of family stories. Generous, petty, hilarious, tragic. Still, the two streams blended. Paracelsus's undines map most perfectly onto water bride folk tales like Messalene or the Selkie Wives, a boundary crossing romance that's lovely until a taboo breaks and the lover returns to the water. Gnomes, they can overlap some with dwarves, kobolds, and goblins that are within the mines and cellars. Sylphs got absorbed into an airy kind of fairy with wings image that didn't become common until the Victorian boom in fairy art and theater. Earlier fairies didn't usually have wings when they were depicted. The Victorians added them along with gaslit stage magic, butterfly costumes, and a whole genre of fairy painting. Alexander Pope even cast sylphs as the airy guardians of beauty in his famous 1714 poem, The Rape of the Lock. So if you picture dragonfly wings and glitter, you can thank the 1800s for that, not actually the Middle Ages. Let's also nod to a wider world. In Japanese Shinto, kami are honored in waterfall stones, old trees wrapped with shimiwana ropes. In classical Rome, every place had a genius loci, a spirit of place, not as a metaphor, but as a religious reality. In Hindu traditions, devas stand behind forces and forms of nature. And in Islamic thought, jinn are said to be created from smokeless fire, a striking echo if you grew up hearing about salamanders in the flame. Different cultures, similar intuition. Nature is not just scenery. One more folklore twist that I love because it kind of rings so human is the Scottish minister and folklorist Robert Kirk. In the 1690s, he described subterranean people with shifting, subtle bodies. He treated them like neighboring folk with their own laws and diet, sometimes helpful, sometimes dangerous. He died young, and the village story said that fairies took him. Was that literally believed? Maybe. Did the tale give people a way to talk about the sudden loss and the thinness of the world? Absolutely. All of which brings us back to you and me. Whether you call them elementals or fair folk, most traditions agree on one practical rule. Approach the unseen with respect, and it tends to respect you back. So let's step into the 19th and 20th centuries when industrial smokestacks were rising and at the same time esoteric movements were pressing their ears to the ground. Rosicrucian writers took Paracelsian ideas seriously. Later, the Theosophical Society popularized talk of devas and nature spirits as part of a global spiritual ecology. Out of that soup came Rudolf Steiner and anthroposophy. Steiner gave lectures describing gnomes, undines, sylphs, and salamanders as participants in plant life. Gnomes with the subterranean chemistry of roots, undines with the fluid life of sap and blood, sylphs with light and pollen, salamanders with warmth and ripening. Whether you buy his clairvoyance or not, you can see why biodynamic agriculture still draws folks. It's organic farming plus ritual attention to the living character of a place. And then there's Findhorn, a sandy, wind-whipped patch of northern Scotland that became the most infamous garden in modern spiritual history. In the 1960s, Peter and Eileen Caddy and their friend Dorothy McLean ended up living by a caravan park with poor soil. McLean said that she learned to tune into devas, the intelligences behind the plants, and wrote down practical guidance. The garden exploded with huge vegetables and flowers. This drew BBC crews, skeptics, and seekers. Was it communications with plant architects, a uniquely mild microclimate, and a mountain of compost and manure? Probably a mix of devotion, attention, soil care, and something numinous that's hard to quantify. Whatever the mechanism, the story's moral is loud. When people treat nature like a partner, results can surprise everybody. So now, if you prefer your wonder in a lab coat, you still can have a seat at this fire. Over the last few decades, research has revealed that plants and fungi form vast underground trade networks, the so-called Wood Wide Web, passing nutrients and information. Trees bruise the air with chemical signals when insect jaws bite their leaves, and neighbors change their chemistry in response. Plants prime defense when they hear the munching of caterpillars. There's serious debate on how far we can push words like intelligence for plants, but the direction of discovery is clear. Forests behave less like static backdrops and more like bustling neighborhoods. Zoom out even further and you get the Gaia hypothesis, the idea that atmosphere and rocks co-evolve as self-regulating systems. Early versions were controversial, but the core insight that the Earth behaves like a coupled semi-stable living system is now a mainstream way of thinking in Earth science. Do any of these findings prove elementals? No, but they do keep nudging us toward a worldview where the line between mechanism and meaning isn't as thick as we were told. The more we learn, the more the world looks like a web of relationships. And that's the bridge. You can be a mystic with a trowel or a botanist with a mass spectrometer and still arrive at the same place of humility, attention, and partnership. So, how do humans actually collaborate with the not quite visible? Some do ritual. A witch might call the quarters of earth, air, fire, and water at the start of a ceremony, asking the elementals to witness and protect. A Shinto family might tie a fresh shimenawa rope around an ancient camphor tree at the shrine and clap to announce themselves to the kami. A farmer, following Steiner's biodynamic calendar, stirs a preparation in a figure eight under the twilight sky, then flicks droplets over the soil like a blessing. An Icelandic road crew might quietly pause a project when locals say there's an elf rock that needs time to move so we don't ruin their house. And a Catholic person, they could light a candle and say a prayer to that fire, and that illuminates everything, which, a medieval person might have translated to a salamander's smile. Who knows? Lots of people also do it informally. You can think a creek. You ask the forest permission before you cut. Some people even leave a teaspoon of honey at the edge of a garden and, say that it's for whoever tends that place. Does it feed a house brownie, a fox, your own better habits, all three? The point is relation. If you try any of this, you'll notice a simple, measurable effect. You become more observant. Your hands slow down. You keep promises to your patch of the earth. You start noticing when a place feels off and when it feels like it's sighing with relief. And then, if you're like many practitioners, you can start logging little oddities you don't quite know what to do with. The gust that arrives exactly when you invite the air. The candle that burns steadily all night except during that story. The raven that screams precisely at the punchline like he's in on the bit. We don't need to explain all these things, just honor them. So the gnome hat, it came later. Garden gnomes didn't leap straight from Paracelsus into your aunt's front yard. The tall hatted fellows, they go back to the 19th century Germany. In 1847, an English landowner named Sir Charles Isham is credited with importing some of the first terracotta gnomes to Britain after a German trip. One of his little guys named Lampy still resides at Lamport Hall. It's a reminder that sometimes the silly object in a garden carries a deep lineage. A Renaissance earth spirit became a Victorian lawn companion and then became our community's mascot in a way. And then the fires people and the salamander's coat. Medieval bestiaries said asbestos was spun into uncompostable cloth from salamander's hair, and emperors supposedly used it to impress dinner guests by tossing napkins into the fire and then pulling them back clean. Weird, yes, but it shows how humans wanted a being for every phenomenon. Smokeless flame became gin, incombustibility became salamander fur. Our minds bridge physics with personhood pretty easily. And then back to fairy wings not even being modern. Those delicate wings we slap on every fairy costume, that's largely a Victorian art and theater invention. Painters like Richard Dadd, pre-Raphaelites, stage effects and Shakespearean revivals all combined to put feathers on the fair folk. Earlier elves and brownies and house spirits were wingless neighbors. The wings aren't wrong. They kind of seem like they're a fashion that stuck. And it's helpful to remember that, our own inner pictures of things can change. So undines is an obvious one that from the Latin unda, wave, and sylph appears to be a Paracelsian invention that later writers developed, linking it to woods and air. Gnome likely comes from the Paracelsus coinage of gnomes, which scholars connect the idea of knowledge or earth dwelling. Exactly which root it's debated, but the fact that the word probably began in a Dr. Alchemist notebook and now sells solar light paths, that's culture doing its thing again. So, are they real? Let's put the cards on the table. Some people listening may have seen things. Some may have never seen anything, but like how it feels to act as if, it was. Some want evidence. Most of us kind of stew in all the different options, depending on the day. So on one level, elementals are a language. When you say gnome, you compress the mineral, fungal, bacterial, root level genius of soil into a face you can greet. When you say sylph, you remember that this morning's breeze carried pollen, spores, cool, scent, the relief breath. Language shapes behavior. Treat the river as a thou, and you pollute less. Treat your fire and hearth as a place with a keeper, you waste less. Treat the air not like an it, but as a partner, and you notice the invisible things that some of us are doing to the air that are making it worse for everyone. On another level, the world keeps producing edge effects, moments that feel like two realities, shaking hands. The more you practice respect, the more those moments happen. Are you primed to see a pattern? Sure. But also, are you stumbling into a conversation that was always there? Maybe. The farmer poet Wendell Berry has a line that I like. There are no unsacred places. There are only sacred places and desecrated places. If you live by that, your life gets better. Your town gets kinder. Your creek gets cleaner. Whether it's true in a lab sense is almost a different category of question. The Church of Gnome, we're comfortable on that threshold. We won't make you sign a belief statement. We just want you to try walking as if the world is full of neighbors and see what that does to you. So, some stuff you can try without getting too weird about it. If you are curious about all these sort of practices, you can pick a spot. That could be a windowsill, a plant, a backyard corner, a strip of trees along a bus stop, somewhere that you're going to be seeing daily. Introduce yourself. out loud, quietly. I live here. I'd like to be a good neighbor. Give and receive. Bring a thimble of water on hot days. Leave a crumb for the birds. Pick up 2 pieces of litter that you didn't make. And make a practice once a week. Greet by element. Earth, thank you for your steadiness. Water, thank you for your flow. Air, thank you for breath. Fire, thank you for warmth and light. Start seeing if you notice any feedback. Does anything change your mood? The way the squirrels behave when you arrive? Does your attention find tiny, repairable things that you used to ignore? It's not about proof, it's about relationship. If you feel silly doing it, excellent. The door through silliness often leads straight to reverence. So before we close, let me speak the 4 elements as they are spoken in our church with gratitude and with some weirdness. So may earth under your feet be generous and exact. May the gnomes of soil and stone remind your bones how to carry what is real without hardening your heart. May water in your cup, blood, clouds, and kitchen sink be clear. May the undines teach you how to release and renew, how to carry memory without drowning in it. May air in your lungs and all around your life be sweet and honest. May the sylphs nudge good ideas towards you on quiet mornings. And may fire in your hearth, heart, and home burn steady and safe. May the salamanders teach you clean transformation, not the scorched earth kind. And may we all learn to walk like neighbors in a neighborhood that includes stones and storms. Gnome blessings, my friends. Let's keep the maybe alive. Maybe these gnomes are all around us. Maybe there's sylphs in the air. Who knows? But if we start treating nature and just common day-to-day things and personify it, I think for a lot of people that will help them to start treating the earth better. So once again, gnome blessings to my fellow Gnomeans. Until next time.